But right now, ladies and gentlemen, we got one of my favorites of all time, ECW legend New Jack. How you doing, buddy?
What's happening, man?
Good. I'm doing great, man. Let me get this right out of the way, dude, because I saw you Extreme Reunion, and it was a tough show.
Right.
But Extreme Rising was fucking awesome, bud. Tell me how much fun, because you got on the mic and you started screaming to us, buddy. How awesome was that?
Dude, it was, you know what, it was something that I guess you really would have had to been there to, experience it, but the whole thing that just fucked my head up was the fans were like, it was like looking at a whole new generation of throwbacks. You know what I mean? Yeah. It was like, all the people, like all the old guys that was coming to ECW shows down in, Philly, whatever. It was like I felt like these were their kids, you know what I mean? And it's like, they came to the show, they knew who everybody was, you know what I'm saying? And I was just like, look, we got to go all out on this one. I'm like, now I hadn't dove off the shit in like damn near 10 years. I'm like, we got to go all out. And when I told Shane, I said, if I see an opening where I can do a table spot, I said, we're going to do it. And I said, the only thing I see that's got any height to it is that little shit over the door. So, I did that little spot. And I mean, I didn't hold back. You know what I'm saying? And when I got home, I paid for it because I was hurting like a motherfucker. But I had a good time. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I think the fans went home with more to talk about in a good way than they did the first show. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So
listen,
I think we put out. We put out really
and listen, seeing you go running through the crowd, dude, and absolutely putting on a show. Clay, you went off the top of that bleacher thing. At one point we lost sight of you because you were on top, and then you were gone. It was fantastic. It was a classic. It felt like old ECW. Is that what you felt sitting in the ring, man? Like it was back? Like is Extreme back, dude?
Well, it never went anywhere. You know what I mean? We just, I just honestly, I took a step back and I watched the hardcore part of wrestling, which, a lot of people always say, well, New Jack, that's all you can do is hardcore. Well, I always tell them, go look at Smoky Mountain when I wrestled with Ricky and Robert Tracy, Dirty White Boy, the Armstrongs. You know what I'm saying? We wrestled then. You know what I mean? And then when we got up to ECW, it took us a step higher to where, and Paul Lee was like, he wanted the extreme stuff. Well, after we did it for so long, and then it started giving these indie guys an excuse to not learn how to wrestle, but to get in there and just beat the fuck out of each other with fucking chairs and, set each other on fire and tables and all that crap. And I'm like, okay, you can do that, but you can't do a headlock. All right. So, we went back, and I told Mustafa, I said, what we going to have to do is show them why, who put the E in extreme. You know what I'm saying? And we went out, and I told Jesus and Rutgers, I said, y'all, we going to have to go out there and goddamn give them a fucking show. You know what I mean? And that's what we did. And, I mean, we established that shit. Me and Mustafa was the first ones to do a whole lot of stuff, that other people hadn't done. And as far as, the music playing through the whole match, going through the audience, working our way around the crowd, you know what I'm saying, without killing somebody, and then doing a little table dive and go back. And, of course, the promo, then, that's like, to me, that's second to none. Can't nobody in this business follow me when it comes to promos. I know this, you know what I mean? And to give the fans what they wanted this show, I told Shane, I said, I'm not holding back. I said, I'm going to give them what they thought they was going to get. It was almost like, psych, we ain't going to give it to you yet. And I was really pissed off about it. But I was like, this show, I renamed it to Extreme Redemption. You know what I mean? Because I'm like, we got to redeem ourselves to let these motherfuckers go home with something happy to talk about. And I think that we accomplished that.
Oh, big time. Brandon Galvin?
Damn, first off, New Jack, I think you need to become the promoter maybe because Extreme Redemption, that's an awesome name for a show. But, you're back with Mustafa now, so what's it like being back with him? How important is it for you to be back with Mustafa and, just being around all like the ECW original guys that you grew up with wrestling and tearing down the house?
Well, I mean, you know what, honestly, I really don't keep in touch with those guys. You know what I'm saying? It's like when we get to a show, it's like, it's not like we sitting around in the back, with our legs kicked up, you know what I mean? I might be somewhere over in a corner, me and Mustafa might talk, we might not, you know what I mean? And it was like to see a lot of the guys from back then and to look at what they done turned into now, I was disappointed. You know what I mean? To see somebody like Mahoney walking there with no fucking teeth in his mouth, you know what I mean? Looking like a candle that's been waxed down and melted. I was disappointed. To see people walking around that's fat and out of shape, I was totally disappointed. You know what I mean? Whereas with me, I was like, okay, we done got older now. We should care more about what we look like now. So, let's go out there and give them a show without. And honestly, back then in ECW, dude, I was cocaine up. You know what I mean? I'll be so high when I go in the ring, I didn't know my ass from a hole in the ground. You know what I'm saying? And it took a lot of time for me to realize that I was killing myself. So actually, from the fans' point of view, they might look at it and say, oh, the old crew is back. Well, we was all set to do our jobs. But how I felt about people in that locker room, I could have gave less than two shits about seeing anybody in that locker room.
Listen, it came from Mike Hale or Mike Chiari?
Yeah, New Jack. You mentioned Balls Mahoney there a second ago, and you got heat with him, and it's pretty well documented at this point. And there's a lot of reports floating out there about what happened prior to the show in Philly. So I was wondering if you could tell us what happened and, why you two have such atomic heat right now.
Okay, I'll try to give it to you as quick as I can. Okay, we do a show in Orlando for Frank Goodman. Balls Mahoney meets this rat. He takes the rat to a hotel. And they're in the room, which is, for those who don't know, a rat is a female bitch that goes to all the shows. All right, they go to the hotel room. She cuts herself, but he cuts her on the arm. He's sucking her blood out of her arm. And then she's licking his nasty-ass forehead. All right, then they take blood and rub it all over the walls and all over the toilet seat and the bathroom, the mirrors, the fucking TV, the phone, the doorknob, everything. All right? So Frank Goodman is left with a bill where they got to call people that remove blood from crime scenes to come there and clean that room up before the maid can even go in the room. So when I found this out, I started going public, and I said, y'all should know how nasty fucking Balls is, okay? And I said, it's done went beyond ignoring anymore. You know what I'm saying? Because if you got to get in the ring with one of the boys and you got some kind of STD, and they should know about it. You know what I mean? Or if you got some kind of blood infection, then they should know, and people, I think, should be aware that he is nasty like that. So I did it not to make him look bad, but I did it just so people that would have a choice if they wanted to work him or not. You know what I mean? Because, he's worked Abdullah. Abdullah got hepatitis C. All right? So Balls and Abdullah they've been in the ring together. You know what I mean? And then Balls is the kind of person where, he would pick up food off the ground and eat it. That's just how fucking disgusting he was. When he did that shit with that girl, that drew the line for me. I said, now you are going to be put on a spot that you're not going to like. Okay? So I went and I started doing interviews, and I started putting stuff on YouTube and Facebook and the whole nine to tell people that Balls is now drinking blood from rats. Okay, somebody that he don't even know. Okay, she claims to be a vampire. He claims to be a vampire. So, I just started posting shit on him back and forth and just going. Well, Balls decides to call me or text me one day and said, Jack, I'm going to do a shoot DVD, and would it be okay if I call you a nigga? And I said, yeah, Balls. I said, if that's what you want to call me that. I said, but you be prepared for the consequences and the repercussions that's going to follow that. All right? So he sent word down before that April show that if I came near him, he was going to stab me. I laughed that one off. Okay? Then he sent word down to that show we just did that he went out and purchased a gun. Okay? And if I made any move towards him and his family, he was going to shoot me on the spot. Now, first of all, you don't warn somebody on some shit like that, especially me. If you give me the heads up that you going to fuck me up, I'm going to get you first. And then I had already told him before, I said, if you come at me like that, I said, this will not make it to the National Guard Army. I said, you won't make it to the National Guard Army. You know what I mean? But he went on and did it anyway. The Thursday before the show, Balls does this shoot DVD, and he talks about me. He talks shit about Frank Goodman. But he said, especially to me, he said, the stuff that New Jack has been saying about me and doing, that's only something a nigga would do. All right? Then he told somebody he had went and bought a gun. All right? Now I was like, okay, if it's to that point, and when I had heard from the people that was there when he shot that video that he said it, all bets was off. It was nothing else to talk about. We didn't have a discussion. And when Balls walked in the locker room and he had this little shit-eating grin on his face, and he looked up and he looked at me and smiled at me like, hey, I said it. And the next thing you know, he was looking up at the fucking ceiling. And then I got him up and I started beating the shit out of him. And he didn't even fight back, dude. He just covered his arms over his head and was screaming, stop, stop, stop. And I'm like, what happened to that? I said, call me a nigga now. You know what I mean? I said, them days is done, son. You know what I mean? I said, maybe 1812, you could have called New Jack a nigga and gotten away with it. I said, but not in 2012, you won't. And I beat the fuck out of him. And it was to a point where I almost started, I didn't feel sorry for him, but I was like, did you really believe you was going to come in here and you done called me a nigga, and I warned you about it? You know what I mean? And then, he runs out of the fucking room like a little bitch, and he runs in the office and tells Shane Douglas, if y'all don't pay me more money for this show now, you have two choices. Either pay me more money or I'm going to call the police on New Jack. And they said, well, call him. They said, we ain't giving you shit. And he didn't want to be seen by nobody, but he still had to go out there and do a match. And see, this is the thing I've told people for years. When you fucking with me, I don't mess with nobody until they mess with me. I have to be provoked. He provoked me. You know what I'm saying? And it was to a point of no return. And I guess later on he tried to come up to me and say something to me. And I said, if you don't get the fuck away from me, And then that's when after security had to follow me around the rest of the night because he actually thought that it was going to be like some locker room shit. Bro, I'm from the street. You know what I'm saying? If I whoop your ass on the street, I'm not going to come back to your house the next day and have a peaceful dinner with you. That means I don't like you. I don't fuck with you no more. You know what I'm saying? So for him to have this wrestling locker room mentality and he just got his ass handed to him on a fucking silver platter, do you really think I'm going to shake his hand? If anything, I would have did the same thing to him that I did to Brian Knobb. When Brian Knobb tried to shake my hand, I knocked his ass out again. You know what I mean? So it's like this business is a ass-kissing, backstabbing, you don't trust no fucking body business. You know what I mean? And everybody's out to get your spot. So I've always been for me and me only. If Mustafa started cutting the food, I was done with him. And then when we started to do business together, we got back together. I could handle mine on my own. As far as these pussies in the locker room, I don't give a shit about none of them. You know what I mean? And if any of them was to like try to call me out, then expect the unexpected. And Balls came about 2 seconds away from getting a machete across the back of his fucking neck. You understand? And I actually got tackled by Atlas Security because I was about to cut that motherfucker's head off. You know, so I'm just like, I don't give a shit about it. Balls should not even be allowed to get in a fucking ring anymore. You know what I'm saying? Because, dude, that is him. He is a threat. You know, he is a walking fucking germ. You know what I mean? And the only thing you bring in when you bring Balls is, you bring in a name from 1990-something. You don't get the same Balls Mahoney you got back then. You getting this skeleton of a motherfucker that used to exist and he's not dead. He's just still walking. You know, I don't give a shit about him. You know what I mean? And it's like the only thing he can do now is run and have his wife to contact WrestleZone or somebody else, and he's going to do an interview. I'm like, I don't give a fuck. I said, Ball got his ass whooped in front of a whole room full of people. People that was there know what I did to him. You know what I mean? I dislocated my elbow hitting that motherfucker. You know? And then it was like, and then Rob Feinstein came out, he said, Jack, can we do an angle on this? I said, what you mean an angle? He said, can we do something like, Balls will do an interview and then you run in on him and beat him up and then y'all do a face-off and then y'all have a match. I said, what part of I'm not getting in the ring with that nasty motherfucker again did you not get? Okay. I said, this ain't going to be no fucking angle. I'm not going to fucking get in the ring with Ball. I said, Ball is fucking nasty. And I said, I said, if you make money off the DVD, God bless you. I said, but no, I'm not going to cooperate with that one. I said, because that motherfucker bleeding on me, I shoot myself in the fucking head. No, sir.
That's fucking nasty,
man. That's basically what happened.
And listen, now with Extreme Rising coming back in November, are you going to be part of it this time?
Yeah, I'm going to be part of it.
Oh, awesome! Did they tell you what you're going to do? I saw they were voting for who wants to be in the steel cage match. You and it's the Gangsters versus Blackouts, one of the options. That's what I voted for. Would you be looking forward to a cage match, an old school cage match?
Of course. I mean, it don't necessarily have to be old school. It'll just be like, hey, bro, I'm still up with the times. You know what I'm saying? Things done changed, weapons done changed, names done changed, but I still know how to do it. You know what I mean? And if I get selected for it, I would be glad. I don't give a fuck who they put in the ring. You know, I would offer my hand out. I would be like, I want you. I don't care who it is. Just put us in there and lock the fucking door. You know what I mean? And let us do what we got to do. You know, and like I said, I mean, with the shit that Shane is doing right now, Shane, Kevin Klein Rock, Cody Michael, what they're doing with us, bro, it's just like I said, the first show was a learning experience. The second one, we redeemed ourselves. Now we're off, and there's no stop. You know what I mean? And we are giving fans what they thought they was going to see in that WWE shit. You know what I mean? We are giving them what they want to see, with the extreme stuff, with the, it was like I said, with all we did, it was like a 3-ring circus, you know what I'm saying? You had a little bit of wrestling over here, a little bit of high flying over there, a little bit of hardcore over here, and then you put it in a pot and you stir it all up, and then you came out with ECW. You know what I mean?
That's why we love it.
People went home satisfied, you know what I'm saying? And we still have the ingredient. You know what I'm saying? We just got new spices that we use in there, which are the new faces. You know what I mean? So we putting them in a pot with the older guys, and we stirring it all up, and we coming up with a new version of what died in 1999 or 2000.
Listen, man, we love it, dude. We love what you do. I was there at the Philly show. It was fantastic. Listen, everybody who's listening loves Extreme Reunion. We've been working with them since the first show. Go vote for New Jack. I want to see the man in the cage. New Jack, tell the people goodbye, and thanks for coming on, man. We really appreciate it, brother. Thanks for clearing the air about that.
All right, man. I appreciate you having me on, and to all the fans that have been supporting us, keep up your support because we're going to deliver just like the mailman. We'll be there.